Good evening to our special guest speakers, university academics and fellow students. My name is Konya Ronas and I'm the Professional Development Officer of SUPA. I'm very proud to be hosting this industry night organised by SUPA. I would like to thank the four speakers that will be presenting this evening for dedicating their time to come and educate us on the myriad of options that exist in the pharmaceutical industry. Please note that the industry night is being video recorded and may become available for viewing at a later date. Our first speaker for this evening will be Jared Brown, who has been the Senior Poisons Information Specialist in charge of research and toxicovigilance activities at the New South Wales Poisons Information Centre for the past 3 years, and prior to this was a Poisons Information Specialist for 1.5 years. Currently, he also works as a Medicine Information Pharmacist for the MPS Phone Services, Medicines Line and Adverse Medicines Events Line. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thanks, Connie, and thanks for having me here tonight. And I apologise if you've seen this presentation before if you're here in first semester, but this presentation is concentrating on my role at the Poisons Information Centre, not the NPS role, but a lot of the Poisons Information Specialist role, actually, as you'll see, does involve drug information provision as well. So the role that I do at NPS, being Medicines Information Pharmacist, kind of assists with that as well. So in terms of the role of the Poison Centre and what we do, if people aren't already aware, so it's a 24-hour service available for anyone in Australia, and we also do get some calls from overseas, for consumers and health professionals to call through to. And our Poison Centre, the one based in Sydney, takes about 110,000 calls per year at the moment, and that's shared, there's about another 110,000 calls per year by the other 3 poison centres in Perth, Brisbane and Melbourne. And in terms of the types of calls that we get, so a vast majority are regarding exposures, so be that an intentional drug overdose, it might be an unintentional kind of double dose that people have accidentally taken or given their child a double dose. It may be children getting into medicines or other chemicals around the home, and bites and stings as well. And that's the common misconception that people have is that, yeah, we do only take calls about children, but in reality, more calls that we take are actually about adults in the overall, in terms of serious calls. Children generally don't have enough of things to cause a problem. The actual specialty that we end up providing specialised advice on is more in the intentional overdoses and around bites and stings. And we also do take a large number of calls about drug information, so there'd be that drug interactions, side effects, kind of pregnancy and breastfeeding use. We are one of the few 24-hour services available, as opposed to my role as an MI pharmacist at Medicines Line, where we're only 9 to 5, being one of the few kind of pharmacy-based services that are 24 hours. We do get a lot of calls because obviously people do have questions after hours and on weekends in particular. And in terms of what types of things that we get called about, what substances are involved, you'll see a lot of kind of familiar candidates, things which are commonly used in the community essentially. So you see kind of paracetamol, ibuprofen, mental health medications, because they're the ones that are more likely that people who are going to take an overdose are on and have access to. And then you have kind of cough and cold preparations, so for young children either being double dosed or accidentally getting into them. And hopefully those calls will now drop given the latest TGA update that they won't be or shouldn't be used in under 6s, so that may fall off. And then you've got alcohol obviously and various cleaning agents around the home, and we get a lot of calls about the silica gel drying agent sachets which are in shoeboxes, because again they're everywhere and they say do not eat on them, so people assume that means that they're toxic. And as I said, bites and stings, be that from any of the various creatures that we have in Australia, and a lot of we also get specialty licensed things from like snake keepers who like to keep exotic snakes as well. And in terms of the kind of call, the actual exact kind of details that callers would give us and what we need to provide in a call, this kind of little bit of a rundown gives you an idea of what a poisons information specialist would need to kind of do in terms of risk assessment and advice that they provide. So as you see, like with the first scenario, we'd have an emergency doctor calling from a hospital asking how to manage a paracetamol overdose. So we would be assessing whether it's a toxic dose, what they need to do. Do they need to start the antidote now? Do they need to do a blood test first? And kind of when to do the blood test? Various things like that, which inexperienced doctors and nurses calling up, they don't know what to do. So at least they do have, particularly in non-teaching hospitals, that they have an expert resource to call upon. And then you see a kind of typical call from a worried parent about someone who's swallowed dishwashing powder. So as a poison specialist, you'd need to be thinking about, well, what was the brand name of the dishwashing powder, look that up in a database and assess kind of its ingredients and its pH and work out whether that does pose a potential corrosive risk to the child, and then advising on the kind of signs and symptoms that they need to be looking out for and when to seek further care, and if there's any first aid advice that we would recommend. And just to pick out another kind of scenario, paramedics commonly call us because they generally have lesser training in terms of, particularly with the whole range of drugs available, they'll know a few, but they won't know the whole range of drugs available. So they commonly call us to say, well, what should we expect when we arrive on scene for this patient? And kind of sometimes they also ask in terms of the urgency in responding to a patient who's taken an overdose. And then this just gives an example in terms of kind of the bites and sting type calls that we get, which we're not necessarily that well trained from our pharmacy degree, but further training provided at the Poison Centre gives us that ability to answer those calls in terms of like a redback spider bite, like when to seek medical care and what's the appropriate first aid for a redback bite, both from the community level and when they're presented to hospital. It's a very common call to us is like when to give the antivenom from the doctors. And then we do have the very serious cases, so like a snake bite case, where the majority of snake bites don't produce any serious toxicity, but when they do, we have the clinical expertise backup of medical toxicologists who are generally either emergency physicians or clinical pharmacologists who've undergone further training. And so we always have them available 24 hours to transfer complex cases through to them. So it allows you to have that interprofessional collaboration with both kind of clinicians at the site and also external to the site that we can connect them through to. And in terms of the experience, well, most poison specialists are pharmacists from background, but there are a few in Australia who are science graduates. It's not a large workforce. There's only about 40 poison specialists around Australia, but it is an international, like the poison centres all around the world, particularly in the developed world. So there are opportunities to work in other places outside of Australia, and there's more medicines information positions, and because of the crossover in the role, it may be a consideration in terms of getting into either medicines information in a hospital, providing drug information to health professionals, or such as an NPS, like a community consumer line, or even in kind of pharmaceutical industry, their medical information services as well. So there is that kind of diversity, and that's the experience that you bring from a role like this or from those kind of roles you can translate into poison centre work. Generally, clinical experience, in particular hospital pharmacy experience, is desirable in looking for a candidate, but about 50% of our current workforce don't have hospital pharmacy pharmacy experience, so it doesn't mean that it precludes you from selection. And obviously, being a phone-based role, you need to be able to speak clearly and listen to people very well, and be able to be quick. We do take probably on average between 60 and 80 calls per 8-hour shift. So there's a lot of calls that we are dealing with, and you need to be able to be very efficient in both getting the information you need and delivering the information. But you don't necessarily need to be able to recall it all off the top of your head. There is obviously ability to look up things. And as you can expect an MI pharmacist, that's the kind of questions you get as an MI pharmacist, a whole range of various drug info queries. At Poison Centre we only generally deal with very simple queries because we don't have time to get into the complex ones. Those ones we refer in hours to medicines line. And in terms of the resources that we use, well, there's a range of specialist drug information texts and poisons information texts which you need to familiarise yourself to work in a position at Poison Centre, and that's all kind of provided on the job in terms of training. And if you ever need, if you have a query in your later career relating to poisons information, we can always either give you the initial information or refer you to what resources would have that in it. As a secondary role at Poison Centre, I also do the research and toxicovigilance work, which involves identifying kind of emerging trends in poisoning, and that, like the latest one was a substance which was taken off the market or made illegal earlier this month, was dimethylamine, which was in bodybuilding supplements and was also in just kind of street drugs as well. And so we provided data to the TGA on cases of toxicity that we've had from that, and that's also been submitted for journal publications. So those kind of emerging things, which only really a Poison Centre collects enough cases of to be able to actually make it meaningful, rather than just that one doctor knows of one case and it's quite sporadic. But we have more of a public health role in terms of collating those cases that we're notified about. And we also follow up newly marketed drugs, particularly kind of psychiatric drugs, like the latest ones that we're looking at, like this desvenlafaxine in overdose and what its effects are, so we can then give better advice to our callers in the future, and that's kind of shared with the wider toxicology community. And in terms of what I like, kind of alluded to a lot of it already, but it's really good to be able to work with a lot of different people and get the appreciation from people calling through, because you are giving them a good service, and at a time generally when there's no one else to call, because we are a 24-hour service, and there's a lot of new things to learn all the time. It's not just kind of, these are the drugs we have at the moment, this is what you need to know. There's obviously all the other chemicals out there which we need to know about, and there's the new drugs which come out, and particularly new illicit substances that we need to always be on top of to be able to give advice about. And in terms of what I dislike, well, it's a phone service that anyone can call through, so you do get host callers and other frustrating callers sometimes. And sometimes there's no information on something, and you need to go back to first principles and have that good pharmacology grasp to be able to come up with at least a theoretical answer about what to expect. And yeah, with my research work, I don't only get 8 hours a week, so I can't do enough of what I would like to. And people usually ask about salary, so I just put in the last slide on that. So being in the hospital system, I'm under the New South Wales Health Award in Sydney, Poison Centre, so that's, as you can see, there's the rates, but the penalty rates is, I guess, where a lot of your extra money can come from, depending on how eager you
Thank you, Jared. Next we have Dr. Gregory Pierce, who is currently the Head of Medical Affairs at Alpha Pharma. His role includes the management of the medical information and pharmacovigilance functions, coordinating promotional review, as well as contributing to the development of strategies to enhance the effective use of medicines. He has nearly 25 years' experience in the industry. Please join me in welcoming him.
I actually did pharmacy last century. I'm a graduate from this university and I did my PhD here and had a variety of roles. I started in hospital pharmacy, which I really enjoyed, but as Connie said, the last 25 years I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry, mainly in technical, scientific, medical related areas, but so nothing in the commercial area. So my talk's going to focus very much on the science of drug development and discovery and how pharmacists can fit into that. Yep. Okay, the first thing I'm going to talk about in general terms is what is the business of a pharmaceutical company? What is it there to do? And then what does a pharmacist have to offer that business? So I'm going to talk in fairly general terms. Towards the end I'll focus down on some of the activities that are actually performed in the Australian pharmaceutical industry and what sort of roles that are available. So the first thing is what the pharmaceutical industry does is discover and develop new medicines. So that's our role. And breaking it down into the various steps of discovery and development, you can probably see how pharmacists can knit in and fit into this the whole process. So the first thing is to discover either a small molecule or a biological that affects some sort of disease process, either a cell signaling pathway or an enzyme that's associated with a disease or an abnormal condition. So you can see there your pharmaceutical chemistry will come in very handy, your biomolecular pharmacology, if you still do it, equips you quite well in that area. Once we then discover the molecule, we optimise it so you can actually administer it. We try to enhance the physical and chemical stability so you can formulate a pharmaceutical formulation that someone can take. So pharmaceutics comes into that. We then look at the absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion profile. So pharmacokinetics, pharmacology. We look at trying to maximise the efficacy of the medicine and minimising the toxicity. So your knowledge of pharmacology, toxicology, clinical trials, clinical evidence is important in this area. And then lastly, we want to be able to manufacture the product fairly cheaply and easily. So once again, pharmaceutical chemistry, pharmaceutics. So pharmacists know a lot about the development and discovery process. Then we move into establishing the risk-benefit profile of the medicine, the safety and the efficacy. We look at animal models and then in human clinical trials, so clinical research, clinical evidence, therapeutics. The next step is to establish economic worth of the medicine to support the price. So health economics is becoming more important. Once again, identifying and utilising the evidence. And lastly, when the medicine is in the marketplace, continually monitoring that so you detect any changes in the risk-benefit ratio, so any changes in safety or efficacy. And once again, pharmacology, therapeutics, toxicology. So I always thought that pharmacy fits really well within the activities that occur within a pharmaceutical company. The other important part of discovery and development is not just doing the research, but actually documenting that research with properly developed objective scientific evidence. And why you need that is manifold. You need to document that your drug drug works and it's safe and it's of high quality, so shareholders will continue to invest in the company. You need to convince the regulators, like the TGA, that your medicine is of high quality, it's got acceptable safety and efficacy profiles. You've got to convince fund holders like the PBAC, pharmaceutical benefits, that the medicine delivers value for money. So the cost of the medicine is offset by an improvement in health outcomes. You then need to convince health professionals like doctors, pharmacists, nurses that the product, if they use it, it's going to enhance patient care. The patient's going to get better, they're not going to get unnecessary side effects or reactions. And lastly, you've got to convince consumers that the benefits of using the medicine far outweigh the risks. As you know, most consumers don't have long-term adherence or compliance. Part of our goal is to convince patients that they're actually going to do well on these medicines. So we need a lot of science that you get taught at university to generate the information, and a lot of understanding of how to assemble that science into documented evidence to prove that the medicine is worthwhile having. And I've just looked at the three key areas that we look at in developing a medicine. Pharmaceutical chemistry, which is looking at the active ingredient, the formulation, the stability, the packaging. The preclinical assessment, which is the work in animals or tissue culture, to look at pharmacology, pharmacokinetics, genotoxicity, reproductive and development toxicity. And then finally, clinical research in humans, where you look at bioavailability, clinical pharmacology, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, clinical efficacy and clinical safety. So if you don't recognise that you've learned a lot of that, you probably haven't been attending your lectures. I always feel that pharmacists offer a great deal to the industry because of their training and knowledge. So getting into actually specific roles for pharmacists in the industry. Australia is a little bit different to most countries in that we don't have many homegrown pharmaceutical companies or companies that can do the whole discovery and development process. We've got one company, which is CSL, but they mainly focus on blood-derived products. So most of the companies that you see in Australia are at two ends of the development spectrum. The discovery end, the small start-up bio companies, or the larger offices of multinational companies that mainly look at late-phase clinical research, registration, health economics through into marketing and post-marketing surveillance. And most of those companies you recognise, like Pfizer, Bristol Myers Squibb, Alpha Pharm, they're all offices of multinational companies. So small biotechs that are mainly looking at researching new medicines tend to employ research scientists and business managers, so people with PhDs, people that have got an interest in straight research. The big multinational companies tend to mainly employ graduates with medical science, pharmacy and business backgrounds. So this is probably the main area that we're looking at for employment for future graduates. As I said, employment in small biotechs usually requires a research degree and some post-grad experience because you're at the discovery point. You're actually doing the benchtop assessment. You're doing the animal research to find new products. The big multinational offices in Australia, they mainly focus on marketing medicines. However, they do a fair bit of market entry activities. Market entry is late phase clinical research, regulatory affairs, health economics, medical affairs, which is marketing support, and also obviously sales and marketing. So they're the main areas that you'll find in most Australian pharmaceutical companies: clinical research, regulatory affairs, health economics, medical information, drug safety, sales and marketing. The ones with the asterisks are activities that have to be done. You have to do regulatory affairs. Affairs in Australia, you have to submit individual drug registration applications to the TGA. You have to do drug safety or pharmacovigilance, continually monitoring the efficacy and safety of your medicines when they're in the marketplace. And the ones with the little arrows are things that give you a fair advantage if you do them in Australia. Clinical research gives you an advantage because you expose patients and health professionals to new medicines much earlier in the development cycle, so they're more used to them, they understand them better, they'll adopt them more quickly when they come into the marketplace if they're good products. And health economics, obviously an advantage because it gets your product listed on the PBS, and most medicines are sold through the PBS. So the type of clinical research we do in Australia is, as I said, mainly late phase, which is phase 2 to phase 4. They're all trials done in actual patients. They're not early phase pharmacokinetic studies. You don't necessarily conduct the trials yourself. You usually have them done in big teaching hospitals or big general practice centres. But what you do input into is the design of the study, the selection of the investigators, monitoring the study to make sure they're done to the protocol standard and good clinical practice standard, reporting of the trial and then publishing the trial. And many companies here are involved in multi-centre studies, so across many countries, and they're used as pivotal regulatory trials to get the registration for the product. The next step is regulatory affairs, which is preparing the registration submissions to Australian standards, so assembling all the quality, preclinical and clinical data that you need to demonstrate quality, safety and efficacy, liaising with the TGA when it's submitted to make sure that they haven't got any concerns or questions about it, and then trying to get the information from the parent company to answer those questions. Always ensuring that medicines in the market continue to comply to the expected standards, and this activity, as I said, is mandated by law. Next step in the pathway is you get registration, then you seek pharmaceutical benefits listing. That involves health economics. In Australia, we don't pay for medicines that can't prove that they have value for money, and that means that the price is offset by the additional health outcome benefits. So a health economics associate in Australia will help prepare the submission to demonstrate the comparative cost effectiveness. They'll liaise with the pharmaceutical benefits and the pharmaceutical benefits branch during evaluation and questions to supply answers to the issues they have. And this is a really critical role because, as I said, most of the medicines are reimbursed through the PBS, and if you don't get a reimbursement, you're normally not terribly commercially successful with a new drug. Medical information further on is really there to support the use of the medicine in the community, to support quality use, to supply detailed information to patients and healthcare professionals when they've got questions about the medicine, how to use it more effectively and appropriately. We also tend to support our marketing colleagues to make sure what they say about medicines is supported in fact. So we have a fair interest in evaluating evidence, and then just general scientific and medical support to the company, to our business development, to our manufacturing group if they've got particular questions about the medicines. And the other area is drug safety or pharmacovigilance, and we're there to collect any information that alters the risk-benefit profile of the medicine. Is there a new side effect emerging? Is the frequency of a side effect increasing? Is the efficacy declining over time? These judgments have to be made, and if appropriate, we have to inform prescribers and patients that the profile has changed, and that's usually done through the PICMI. Other opportunities, we still have some manufacturing in Australia. and there's some opportunity to be involved in formulating new medicines and also in sales and marketing. So a lot of opportunities. Industry is going through a fairly tough time at the moment, as pharmacy is. There's the new changes in the way medicines are paid for in Australia come in. So, but there's always going to be opportunities for pharmacists, and I think the industry is continually becoming more evidence-focused, evidence-based, and less sales and marketing oriented. So I think there's always going to be a role for good pharmacists and good medical scientists to work in the industry. So that's my presentation. If there's any questions.
So basically, once you graduate, what do they actually, so if you're applying for a job, say in the pharmaceutical industry, don't they require experience? So
No, not necessarily. We've just employed a new pharmacy graduate that's just finished their registration. Because if you get a keen, young, well-educated, well-trained person, they're very dedicated to their role, they're very keen to learn, they work very hard to pick up the skills that are needed. You often get a lot of...
What position did they...
Medical Affairs Associate, so medical information, drug safety. Yeah. But there's lots of companies that offer graduate entry positions. You don't necessarily have to be experienced.
So following on to that question, what would make you stand out as a graduate, as a pharmacy graduate?
Yeah. The way you present yourself, what you've done in academic life plus outside of academic life, that you're a person that's well motivated and keen to learn, the way you present your CV, showing that you've got good written communication skills, the way you interview. Yeah, I mean, you're looking for someone that that's got all the attributes of being a smart person, that's well motivated, that's keen to learn, that really wants the job and is willing to learn and contribute. Yeah.
How would you be aware of the job offers? Would you apply directly to the company? Would you find it on the website?
Usually on the company website or in the online employment, like Seek and those type of things. They're often advertised in those. And the other thing too is that don't necessarily be concerned if you can't get the job that you want. I mean, you might want to go into, say, clinical research, but there's no clinical research roles. Some people will go into a sales or marketing role to get a start, to show the company that they can work hard, that they're motivated. And over time, if you're a good employee, the company will want to develop you, and you say, look, I'd really like to do some clinical research. Next time there's a vacancy, will you help me apply for that? And often, there's many people that I know that have gone from sales, marketing into medical, and then vice versa. So,
if you had a PhD, would that put you at a great advantage than have one? It doesn't matter what you can get a PhD where you did it.
I mean, I'm pleased I did, because I think PhD teaches you how to think. You're much more critical in your thinking. You've got better evaluation skills, you've got better understanding of scientific methodologies, you've got better written skills. Doing a PhD really teaches you how to write tightly. Lynn's agreed. So it gives you some benefit, but you should always do a postgraduate degree because you want to do the degree, not because it's going to give you a job.
In terms of the clinical trials and people who are employed to design and run those clinical trials, what's the background they usually have?
Pharmacy, nursing, medical science.
With honours or PhD or not?
Not necessarily. Most people are, there's not that many postgraduate people working in industry. And most of them are either straight bachelor or honours. There's some masters, some PhDs. So it doesn't preclude, just coming with a bachelor degree doesn't preclude you from going into the industry. It's really how you present, how you're motivated, what your background is. done some interesting things outside of university in their employment and their social activities. I mean, that gives you a good pointer to what the person's going to be like.
Sorry, one more question. A few of us here are postgraduate, so we're masters.
Yeah.
Would that necessarily help? Like a lot of us have done pharmacology-based science or medical science.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I mean, you're going to have a broader skill set to take. So, yeah. Okay, I think Sylvia's going to probably amplify more, aren't you, on industry. So, if everyone can excuse me, I've just had an ear operated on, so I'm going to go home and get some painkillers. So, I'm sorry. But thanks for
Thank you, Greg. Next we have Dr. Lynn Weeks, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Prescribing Service, or the NPS. She has contributed significantly to the development of quality use of medicines, resources and services for patients and healthcare professionals since 1998. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thanks everyone, thanks Connie. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about NPS, previously called National Prescribing Service, rebranded recently as NPS Medicine-Wise. Just to talk about what we do and who we are and the sort of roles that we have, and to tell you a bit about some of the NPS people, some of the pharmacists we employ. So our job is to help people, whether they be health professionals or consumers, to make the best decisions about medicines and other medical choices. So we now look beyond medicines. We started off just looking at medicines, quality use of medicines. That was what we were set up to do, particularly for GPs. Our remit's much broader than that now, and we're starting to do some work in medical tests as well. So I now have pharmacists getting their head around CAT scans and what that means, and when people need MRIs and all that sort of thing. So that's been a bit of a learning curve for us. We set ourselves up to try and provide advice, as I said, health professionals and particularly GPs, but more and more we're working with the community, and our board has said to us they want to see NPS as basically a household name, so that Australians know if they want independent information about a medicine, that's where you've got to look for it. We're a fair way from that right now, but we do have a big community-based program because of that. And when we think of our work, we think about the consumer at the very centre of it. And whenever we talk to consumers, they tell us they get most of their information about medicines from their family and friends first. Then from the general practitioner and pharmacist, and then they go to the internet. So they're the top 4 sources, so we need to be in all those places, which means we now are in social media. We're working with general practice and pharmacy very, very closely, because that's of course really important. But we're also now starting to work with media and non-medical prescribers, whether they be nurse practitioners or maybe pharmacists not too far away, we'll see. So why do we need to do all this? Just quickly, really 3 reasons. Medicines aren't always safe, and we want people to use them safely. We want people to get the clinical benefit that they set out to do in the first place, and it should be value for money, because as a community we have to be able to afford it, or for that matter the individual has to be able to afford it. So what we do is we have a look at the literature and say, what does the evidence tell us there's a problem about? You know, what's causing the issue? Are people not taking medicines? Are they getting more side effects than we thought they would get? Are they going to hospital when we didn't think that would happen? So we have a look at, first of all, what's the issue? And then we ask, what is it that the GP or the pharmacist or the consumer is actually interested in? Because if they're not interested, they're not going to hear it. So that's the next bit. And then we bring those 2 together and measure our effectiveness. On our staff, we have about 250 people. Most of them are in Sydney, but we have offices in other states as well, in Melbourne, Canberra and Brisbane. There are about 50 pharmacists on the core staff, and we have another 80 people around the country who are also pharmacists, who we call facilitators. And these are the people who visit doctors one-on-one in their rooms and run small group education sessions. So we have, I guess, quite quite a big workforce in terms of pharmacists. What do? Well, they do a whole range of things, and I'll just take you through a few of the sorts of jobs that they do. Before we run any program, so if we're going to go out and talk to doctors about the best way to treat diabetes right now, the first thing we do is some research about what the literature tells us, but also what problems the GPs might be having in terms of how they're managing diabetes right now. So there are people who and this group, I have to say, are usually medical writers or people who do have a master's or PhD, who are comfortable trawling through the literature, doing a systematic review, understanding where the issues are, and providing that advice then to the people who are going to design the program. So these are the people right at the front end. They also do some market research. They'll run some focus groups, for example. They might run those around the country. They might run them with consumers or with GPs. So a range of different skills there, but a little bit of research skill in it for those people. Then we have a group of people who are medical writers who contribute to some of the publications, which I hope you've seen. And again, about half of these people would be pharmacists and half would be have some sort of medical science background. They review the literature, but what they're really thinking about is their audience. So they're thinking about, how do I communicate this really important bit of evidence that I know to my audience in a way that they'll be interesting for them. And so they have different writing styles for different audiences. So if you read Australian Prescriber, it's a bit different to the MPS News because we know the audience is different. If we're writing something for consumers, it's quite different again. And some people will go on and try and get some journalist education as well, so they can improve their writing skills, as I said, particularly for consumers. As Jared said, we run Medicine Line, and we also run the Adverse Medicine Event Line. And there are around 10 pharmacists altogether who man this service. People call in 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Most commonly, they ask questions about adverse drug reactions. It's often someone asking on behalf of their child, husband or wife, mother, depending on so some sort of carer relationship. Sometimes they're ringing for a second opinion. They'll say, I've been to the doctor, but I've also been to the pharmacist, and they said this, and the other one says something a bit different. What do you guys think? So we have to be a little bit careful that we don't get in the middle of those relationships, and we do send people back to their pharmacy or their doctor to get the advice. And the Adverse Medicine Event Line is a reporting system. So what people do there is, if they really think they've had an adverse event, they'll ring up to report that. And I don't know whether you might remember, but a couple of years ago, Zolpidem was in the news a lot because we were getting lots of people ringing up to say they're having sleepwalking, sleep sex, sleep driving, whatever it was from Zolpidem. And those reports are all coming into the Adverse Medicine Event Line. So we had some 300 reports in 1 year. I think in total we had about 700 reports. And that's what had TGA start to think, well, maybe there's something real in this. So the information that comes in is really valuable to the regulator, because they can say, well, actually there probably is really a side effect here that we didn't know about. And it allows people to feel that they're contributing to the system, because it had this really nasty side effect. They want to feel that that information is used in a useful way, and that it improves the system overall. We have an e-health team. The e-health team are involved in putting information in clinical software. They're mostly pharmacists, actually, that team. And what they do is they'll put information into the clinical software, the software that GPs and pharmacists use, and also develop apps for consumers, so an iPhone app for a medicines list, an iPhone app for a sleep diary. So they're doing that sort of work, which is much more about the pointy end of decision making and making sure people have got stuff to use in their home or in their practice when they want it. Most of those pharmacists most of them have probably bachelor level, although a couple have got PhDs where they've actually looked at health informatics as well as pharmacy, and they've mixed those two skills together. We run a lot of programs for health professionals, and we always design them looking at how best to influence people. So we have quite a lot of people who have a background in pharmacy and then have an understanding of how behavioural sciences work, how communications work, how social marketing works. And they are involved in designing programs Also in the academic detailing, as I said, so these one-on-one visits with doctors. They're almost all pharmacists. Will go in and have a chat with the doctor, not to preach to them what they should do, but to have a conversation about what does the evidence say, how do you apply it in practice, how do you get out of it what you really need. And so these people are doing what a drug rep does in a pharmaceutical company a lot of the time, but what we find is that they're actually really popular because the doctor likes this personalised service, and they like the fact that they feel it's coming from an independent source. So, and they can ask questions outside of the single product that the rep might know about, so that the person will go in and talk about a condition, not about a single product. We have a lot of work in the community, and again, pharmacists involved in these activities. Pharmacists are particularly involved in a lot of our media work, both as spokespeople and also as providing the background information. So whenever we have to do any sort of background, the pharmacists will be writing that to make sure it's correct. We don't want to have the wrong information out there. We develop TV commercials. Again, the pharmacists are often the people not doing the creative work. I have to say that's not their strong point. But what they're really good at is making sure that the message that gets across is the right one. Because sometimes once you get an artist into that situation, you've got this idea. What comes out could be really misconstrued by the general public if we don't get it right. So we'll make sure the pharmacist is watching it and saying, is that saying to me what I thought it was meant to say? Because it can become quite complicated. We have people who do regular radio, people on the phone lines, as I said, and more we're involved in social media on Twitter or blogs or on Facebook. So again, there are pharmacists responding to the comments coming through on Facebook. And as one of them said to me the other day, you almost can't believe how uninformed people are sometimes, and the sort of the myths that abound in the community about medicines use. So you get a really first-hand account of how people are thinking about medicines. So why do people do this? Well, pharmacists in our organisation say they like to do it because they feel like they're making a difference. They talk a lot about being passionate about the job, about being the mission of the organisation. They like the idea that they can influence more than just one person at a time, that they can influence a community or a group of people. And that it's about the people, not just the medicine. So our focus is very much on the consumer and the health professional and what their needs are, not just the chemical entity itself. The other thing they really like is that it's a mixed team. You've got a team of really talented people. You have some people who are great communicators. You have someone who's fantastic at making TV ads. You'll have somebody else who is a great scientist, all in the same room, brainstorming things together. And that's a really fun way to work. And I think for many people, that's probably the main driver. And they learn new skills all the time. So there's always someone challenging you to try something a bit different. I'm just going to tell you about 3 of our staff who are pharmacists and what they do. So first of all, James. James is based in Melbourne. He manages 10 people. He's in the e-health team, so the decision support team. So in the last year, they've developed iPhone apps, they've developed a medicine name finder, which is on our website, and they've created e-audits that pharmacists do. As an intern, you'll do an e-audit, clinical audit, looking at the use of medicines in the pharmacy. They also work with NETA, which is the transitional authority for the personally controlled electronic health record. So they're really involved in setting standards there, in designing policy, and being really influential in how that rolls out. Kristen's in Brisbane. She's part of a small team that does one-on-one detailing with the doctors in far north Queensland and remote Queensland. So she's one of those people who flies in, flies out of it. She also supports other facilitators, so she has an education role where she's training people. She works with Medicare Locals, so that's those newer organisations that are around the country for primary care, helping them think about how medicines can be good information about medicines can be in all of their programs. So if they're doing work for Aboriginal communities on Close the Gap, then she'll be a resource person to say, well, what are the medicines issues in here? And she provides a lot of advice in other primary care programs. And finally, Julia is again a big farm graduate of this university, but she's a policy analyst. So she's done a master's in communications and policy, after her bachelor degree. She does strategy development, stakeholder relations, government relations, communications and media. So she's started off with pharmacy but realised her interest was kind of in more of the media and communications area and has taken that tack. And as I was writing this yesterday, I was thinking about my day yesterday, and I was writing this literally in the Qantas Club. So I'd just been to a ministerial round table on antipsychotic use in older people, and we were being asked, how can we solve the problem of too many antipsychotics being used in older people? If you guys have got the answer, can you please tell me at the end of the session? That'd be really helpful. I wrote this talk. I shortlisted some candidates for a new business development role. I did some media on cough and cold medicines for a radio station in Bunbury or somewhere. I finalised the change management plan, started submission for new funding proposal for Australian government so that we've got enough funds to keep going. I reviewed a proposal we're doing for the Singapore government on e-health, wrote a blog for the staff and reviewed some material on use of glucose test strips and whether they should be, the recommendations for monitoring should continue. So a pretty diverse day. It's a pretty typical day, I guess, in many ways, and I think that's what people like. You get that diversity, you get to do really clinical stuff, really quite hard clinical stuff, as well as communications, as well as e-health. So I really encourage you to think about jobs, I guess, outside of the traditional because they can be really satisfying. So any questions? I'm happy to take. Thanks.
So how would you go about applying for a job? So they're like direct website, we go
Direct website, so to that website there's a careers section. You can always send your CV in because things come up as well. In terms of new graduates, one of the really good ways in is often maternity leave positions that come up for 12 months that can be hard to fill. Sometimes there are graduate positions as well. And the other positions that I guess people, fairly new graduates, would take up are the facilitator positions where you're doing that one-on-one training with doctors. Anything else? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Our final speaker for this evening will be Dr. Sylvia Roynes. She is a graduate from the Faculty of Pharmacy at Sydney University with a Bachelor of Pharmacy First Class Honours and a PhD. She worked for Park Davis after completing her PhD and then moved on to Pfizer following the takeover. Sylvia is currently Regulatory Affairs Manager and has 15 years experience in the industry. Please join me in welcoming her.
Okay, so can you all hear me? Yeah. Alright, what I'll do is actually elaborate on what Greg spoke about, and what I thought I would do is focus on careers for pharmacists within the pharmaceutical industry, and I thought I'd tie it into the drug development process so that you sort of get a feel for, okay, how is a drug from beginning to end how does it actually appear on the market, and then what are the roles that pharmacists can work within that. I thought I'd start with a brief overview of the importance of the pharmaceutical industry, look at, like I said, the drug development process, and then roles for pharmacists, and then really hone into, okay, what do those roles involve and what would I need to do within those roles. As we all know, medicines do allow millions of Australians to live longer, healthier and more productive lives, provided of course they're used wisely. And they do improve quality of life. So it's not just about longevity, like living longer, it's about improving quality of life, reducing the need for surgery, hospitalisation and aged care. The pharmaceutical companies do support responsible use of medicines, and there is a lot of work and importance that's placed on this role. And the relationship between the pharmaceutical industry, pharmacists, doctors and government will always remain critical to ensure successful quality use of medicines. Now, what I thought I'd do is just give a brief overview of the drug development process. And does anyone know how much you think it costs to actually get a drug to market. So from drug discovery to actually appearing on the market. Anyone want to take a stab? How much? Close.
8 billion.
What was the next one?
900 million.
Yeah, actually that's even closer. That's pretty good. So it's about 800 million to $1 billion US dollars. So that's a pretty high risk and high cost industry. And when you look at this slide, you'll see that actually 1 in 10,000 compounds that are discovered make it to market. So that's a pretty high risk. If you're putting odds on that, you know, that's high, it's called. So if you look at those 10,000 compounds, only 250 will make it to preclinical studies. So that's your studies in animals, which is what Greg alluded to earlier. And out of those 250, 5 make it to clinical trials, and out of those 5, only 1 makes it to market. So it is a very high risk and high cost industry. Looking at the careers within that drug development process. So as Greg alluded to earlier, let's see if there's a laser pointer. Okay, so within medical you have clinical research, regulatory affairs, medical information and drug safety. We then have patient access, which is health economics, marketing, sales, and there's even roles for training for pharmacists, and then your research and development, but as Greg said, a lot of these roles are actually available overseas. What I'll do is look at each of those roles in turn. So clinical research are responsible for initiating, conducting and reporting all clinical trials. They also ensure that appropriate standards are met. They ensure appropriate trials are taking place with good clinical practice. And pharmaceutical companies often involved with clinical research would have other alliances. So you'd have investigator-sponsored studies or research grants that are also available. A career within clinical research would probably see you starting off, say, as a clinical research associate, then a senior clinical research associate, project manager, and then research manager. Then looking at the actual stages, we have your drug discovery and your preclinical testing, and then we move into the actual clinical studies. So your phase 1 studies are mainly looking at safety. So they're done in a small group of patients and they're normally healthy volunteers. Your phase 2 studies are looking at the effectiveness of the drug, so it's several hundred patients, and then your phase 3 studies are really your large-scale clinical studies that are looking at safety, effectiveness, and the benefits of the drug. And then you have post-approval, which are your phase 4 studies, which a lot of pharmaceutical companies continue to then do. So once you have your clinical studies done, what regulatory affairs you need to actually get your product registered on the market, so approved and registered. So what regulatory affairs does is collate all your preclinical work, your chemistry, which is your quality work, and your clinical studies into a package to then negotiate with government, which is the Therapeutic Goods Administration, to get the product approved on the market. So in Australia, the national regulator is the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, and in New Zealand, the equivalent is MedSafe. And a lot of pharmaceutical companies do regulatory work for both Australia and New Zealand. As well as getting new products on the market, regulatory affairs is responsible for getting extra indications for already registered products, new dosage forms, and maintaining products that are on the market. So that could involve manufacturing, changing manufacturing site or any other updates to quality of the product. A career within regulatory affairs will probably see you starting off as Reg Affairs Associate, then moving on to Senior, Project Manager, and then Reg Affairs Manager. So, fresh-faced out of Sydney Uni, I did apply for a position at Park Davis, and actually at the time it was called Scientific Affairs Associate, which was a combination of regulatory affairs and medical information, which was quite good because you had a broad spectrum of products and you actually did regulatory affairs, medical information, drug safety and training, which gave you the full spectrum. At the time of the takeover of Pfizer didn't have such a structure, so they were actually more within the defined areas that I've gone through, and so I went in as a Reg Affairs Associate and then moved my way up through that channel. As I said, the TGA is the national regulator. The activities are underpinned by the Therapeutic Goods Act and the Therapeutic Goods Regulations, which you may have touched on in some of your lectures. And the government's mandate with medicines is promoting, developing and funding world-class services for all Australians. The Office of Medicines Authorisation, which is a division of the TGA, is responsible for prescription medicine. So most of my experience has actually been in prescription medicine. As Greg also said, the TGA evaluates for efficacy, safety and quality. So that's their role. They need to ensure they have an effective, safe and a quality product on the Australian market. What happens during the evaluation process is that there's also an external advisory committee that's known as the Advisory Committee of Prescription Medicines, that used to be known as ADEC, if some of you have heard that, which is basically a group of experts that then provide advice to TGA whether to approve or not approve a medicine. So depending on the type of medicine, so if it's an antipsychotic, they would have a psychiatrist sit on that committee. If it was a blood pressure medication, they would have a cardiologist sitting on that committee. So it just depends on what group of experts is required. The final decision goes back to what's called the delegate, which is the person within the TGA that makes the decision yes or no following advice from this committee. This is just a brief outline of the evaluation process. In Australia, what they call Cat 1 applications are all your new medicines or new indication dosage forms. So the applications that involve high evaluation. Once an application is accepted into evaluation, which is at this stage, the TGA has 255 working days to evaluate that application. So if you think about drug discovery, then your preclinical studies, your clinical studies, then getting your package together to submit to TGA, you've already probably looked at 10 to 14 years before you get a product on the market. So if you have a patent of 20 years, a company then has, say, 6 to 7, 8 years to actually be able to make a profit on that product after spending, say, $1 billion to get that product on the market. Once you have that product approved and registered by the TGA, in Australia, in order to actually be able to have patients use that product, it is beneficial to have it listed on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. So this is where a job in patient access or health economics would come into it. So basically patient access look at new product planning, pricing and reimbursement applications. So just looking at that in more detail, new product planning is looking at new commercially viable products or pricing structures on the existing products. And then the reimbursement applications look at your feasibility analysis for the current products that are on the market, reimbursement submissions which include PBAC submissions as well as submissions to New Zealand. And the New Zealand agency, just for your information, is called PharmAC, which is a similar reimbursement process, although the Australian one is a lot more advanced than PharmAC. And then price defence for currently listed PBS products. A career within health outcomes or patient access is associate health economist, then health economist, senior health economist, and then manager. The Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee is probably a committee that you've heard about, which is part of the National Health Act, and they too have an expert committee that will then advise whether it's beneficial to have this product listed on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. It's also important to note that the PBAC evaluates effectiveness and cost effectiveness. So TGA has already established that this product is effective, safe and good quality. The PBAC will then re-look at that and go, okay, is the product, it's effective and is it cost effective? So what is it compared to on the market in comparison to the other products that are already on the market, and what's the benefit of having this product listed on the PBS? Okay, so what I thought I'd do is just do a bit of a recap. So we've looked at clinical research, regulatory affairs and patient access. So you've done your clinical studies, you've got your product registered on the market and you've got a PBS listed. So then what other careers are there within that once you have these products available. Greg also said about medical information. So medical information mainly address medical inquiries, which can be to doctors, consumers, pharmacists, nurses, or any other allied health. They also assist in developing the promotional material and reviewing promotional material, which is then used by marketing and sales. And they can also get involved in training of the sales force. A career within medical information will be like medical information associate, senior medical information associate, and then manager. There was also drug safety. So as with any product, drug safety also gets involved with the various other functions within the company. So they're heavily involved with medical information. People ringing through about adverse events, they would then be reported to drug safety as well. Drug safety also liaises with the clinical colleagues in ensuring AEs are reported during clinical trials that are ongoing. And then there's a huge emphasis in post-marketing surveillance and ensuring pharmacovigilance for products already registered on the market to ensure that drug safety is maintained and anything is alerted or head office alerts us to any particular safety issues. So again, within drug safety, you've got the associate level, the senior, and then the manager. Now, that's sort of the medical side of things. There's also roles for pharmacists within marketing and sales. So with marketing, it's mainly managing the performance and the profitability of all the products, developing their launch strategy, and then developing the promotional material which is used by the sales force. Just looking at careers within marketing, so you've got your associate product manager through to team leader, and then management or regional positions or opportunities within headquarters. Obviously, opportunities within headquarters exist across all those fields. The sales department would use the promotional material that's developed by marketing and use that in detailing your physicians or your pharmacists. They would also be educated on the disease state and then look at comparative products on the market. So what are the other options and where does this particular company's product fit into the products that are already available on the market? Within sales, like Greg said, you can start as a sales representative and then there's obviously avenues for development within sales to sales director. And this slide really shows how marketing and sales do work close together. Marketing do develop the promotional material, but they rely on sales to provide feedback on that and see how that promotional material is actually working in the marketplace and what feedback they've received from physicians and key opinion leaders. There's also careers within training which some pharmacists may go into. So training really looks at developing material in order to train the sales force. So that would be developing material on the actual disease state, the products that are available on the market and how that particular company's products fit into the current therapeutic options that are available. They also facilitate sales training and so they give courses on sort of selling, negotiation, presentation skills. And then that would be your career progression within training. So associate training manager through to head of sales effectiveness team. So in summary, the pharmaceutical industry is an essential partner in Australia's healthcare sector. The drug development process from your lab to your product being available on the market is a very high risk and high cost process. When you look at how the actual package is put together, you have your clinical research, regulatory affairs and getting the product approved and registered, then getting the product PBS listed, and then the other functions become available such as your marketing, your sales, medical information and drug safety. And then this is again an outline of careers within that. So you've got careers within medical, and then you've got health outcomes or patient access, marketing, sales, training, and for those interested in research, there are overseas roles within research as well. That was basically it, if there's any questions.
Ask a question about
outsourcing.
I guess you have a lot of functions within a company sort of contracted out, that sort of thing.
If a company, say, doesn't have the resources to conduct the work internally, when you say us, they may hire, say, consultants to do that work, yeah. But as far as like regulatory affairs and medical information and drug safety, they're pretty much solid roles within the companies because you need those functions. Yeah.
You said that you got that job straight out of uni, so
Yeah.
you had done a PhD. Did your PhD actually relate to what you actually studied in your project, or your project was based on? Did it relate to your job in any way?
Not really, but I guess not the actual project per se, but a PhD taught you skills that you needed in that role. So it taught you to think and work independently, it taught you to critically evaluate clinical trials. So when you read clinical studies, you then can interpret them. It taught you the discipline of actually, working through a project from beginning to end. So it was really all those skills, time management, project management, that you then use in your career. So it's sort of more the skills that you learned.
Do you need extensive experience, I guess, to get an entry-level role into?
Well, I didn't have experience. I guess what I sold myself on was I have skills that I can extrapolate to be used in these areas. I had zero experience within the pharmaceutical industry, but like Greg said, if you have a skill set, you can then pick up the rest, and the rest is on the job training.
Like selection criteria, like skill set that they'll be looking for? You're saying things like critical evaluations and
Yeah.
stuff.
So it depends what job you're applying for. So you probably then put down what it would be. So things like problem solving, decision making, time management, critical evaluation, all that. They're sort of skills that you look for in particular functions. Attention to detail, so in regulatory affairs you need that as well. So even though you may not have experience per se in that particular function, you have skills that you can bring to that function. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. To conclude, I would like to thank you all for coming, and please join me in thanking our wonderful presenters.